Hello, Year 9, and welcome to lesson number 3 of week 10. And this is our last lesson on health and diseases. Tomorrow we'll be moving on to a new topic. So today we're going to be looking at the last bit to do with increasing your risk of getting certain diseases, and we're going to be looking at alcohol and other carcinogens. So remember, carcinogens are chemicals that cause cancer, that increase your risk of cancer. So from last lesson, where we were doing about diet and exercise and the importance of a good diet and regular activity on your health, can you define 3 words from last lesson? Or can you write down 3 key points in summary sentences or a paragraph summarizing what it is that we covered? Try and do it without your notes, just to try and force it into your brain for the exams. And then when you have finished, have a look back at your notes just to make sure that what you've written is correct. So pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, so what we need to know from today's lesson. So for 2 to 4, we need to state that drinking too much alcohol affects the liver and brain. Most of you will know that already. Also state that alcohol has an effect on unborn babies. So we're going to have a look at the effects of alcohol on pregnancy, if drinking during pregnant, and also defining the term carcinogen, which we've already done. And as I said earlier, these are chemicals that cause cancer. For 5 to 6, we need to be able to describe the short-term and long-term effects of drinking and describe the effects of alcohol on unborn babies and look at the link between ionizing radiation and cancer. And for 7 to 8, it's explain in detail how drinking alcohol affects the nervous system and evaluate the evidence on the effects of alcohol on a developing baby and explaining the link between radiation and cancer. Okay, so new information, risk factors. Now we've talked about risk factors in several lessons. It's very important that we're able to know what a risk factor is. These are things that obviously increase your chance of getting certain diseases. So there's lots of different agents that increase your risk of developing non-communicable diseases, such as cancer. But we've covered many different non-communicable diseases. Each of them have their own risk factors. Chemicals that can cause cancer are called carcinogens. And it's very important we know that term. It's in the specification. We will need it for the exams. Carcinogens are chemicals that can cause cancer. Some of these you may take into your body willingly, so things like alcohol, but some of them you don't even realize are having an effect on you, such as radon gas, which has ionizing radiation and is a naturally occurring gas that comes from rocks quite often. So there are certain areas where these types of rocks that are releasing it are higher than in other places. So here is a graph, and it shows the risk factors associated with cancer. Quite a lot of them we have covered in previous lessons. So the first one, the biggest risk factor, the highest risk factor, is the use of tobacco. Then we've got obesity, which we were looking at last lesson, but it's actually the second biggest cause of cancer. Then we've got the pathogens, which we covered in detail in previous lessons. Then there is just unknown, so we don't actually know what has caused that cancer. Then it's physical inactivity, which we covered in last lesson along with diet. Then we've got occupational exposures, so certain occupations you'll be working with substances that can be carcinogenic. Then we've got alcohol, which we're looking at today, reproductive factors, so reproductive systems and all that's involved. Then we've got ultraviolet light and ionizing radiation, then environmental pollutants, and then finally prescription drugs, which is a little bit surprising, but some of them do contain chemicals unfortunately are carcinogens. So you don't need to write anything from this, apart from if you didn't already know by heart what a carcinogen is. You might want to pop that down. But that is just showing you some of the areas that increase your risk of cancer. Now, as you probably know from the title of the lesson, we're going to be mostly focusing on alcohol and ionising radiation, which are other forms of carcinogen. And alcohol, which is ethanol, so not all alcohols are in drinking alcohol, but the stuff that you find in wine and spirits and things like that, and beer, is ethanol. And it's a very, very common social drug that's used in many parts of the world. There's also many countries where it is banned, mostly because of religious opinions on that, but it is a very, very common social drug. So can you have a think about all of the effects that alcohol has on the body? So these can be short-term effects, so the effects that drinking will have on you right away. And then some of the long-term effects that you might know of that can happen in the future from prolonged overuse of alcohol. So pause the video and just jot down some of the effects that you know that alcohol has on the body. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you weren't able to put lots of things down. It depends on what you come across outside of lessons, what you remember from Key Stage 3, but there are quite a few effects on the body, and we're going to be looking at that in the next few slides. So some of the things that you might have mentioned for the short-term effects is it can give you this, as it is a drug, alcohol does give an effect of euphoria or happiness, but it can also, in the second little clip, can also make you quite uncoordinated, slow down your reflexes and things like that. And one of the commonly known long-term effects is cirrhosis of the liver. So well done if you knew that, but don't worry too much if you didn't. It's one of the things that we're going to look at in this lesson. So there is a video clip that I'm going to ask you to watch now. So when you exit this, go on to show my homework. I've added the link into the homework, and it's going to be a video that covers quite a lot of the short-term and long-term effects on the body. So what I'd like you to do on your page is just have, for the top bit, short-term effects, and then about halfway down, long-term effects. And then as you see them or identify them in the video, if you could pop them down, deciding whether they are short-term or long-term effects. So if you exit this PowerPoint now, this video now, go on to that video clip and complete that task. Okay, so please add any that you may not have gotten from the video. So we'll go over first of all the short-term effects. So it's quite a relaxing drug, so it can make people feel quite relaxed, it can make them feel quite good about themselves. Then we go to not necessarily wanted effects. We've got dizziness, reacting slowly, which is why it's against the law to drink a certain amount and then drive, because it slows down your reactions. It can cause blurred vision, it can cause slurring of your words. Sometimes it can make people angry, so it can get a little bit violent. It can cause vomiting, obviously if you drink too much. It can cause you to lose your balance because of the effect it has on the inner ear. It causes people to do or say things that they normally wouldn't, and can have trouble controlling how you move, so it makes you quite poorly coordinated. So add any that you missed onto your short-term effects. So you can pause the video if you want to at this point. So here are the long-term effects. So this is caused by prolonged indulgence on alcohol. So we've got liver and brain damage, poor diet, stomach problems, so it can affect the lining of the stomach, frequent infections, so it can increase your risk of pathogens infecting you, problems with the skin, can damage your reproductive organs, causes memory loss or confusion. It can cause heart and blood disorders. It can cause depression, relationship problems, problems at work, which would then lead to money or legal troubles as well. So add any of the long-term effects that you didn't get from the video before we move on. Okay, so we're now going to be looking at the effects on the brain. And in alcohol, we've already said the alcohol is ethanol. That is easily absorbed into the blood and then easily absorbed into your body tissues. And one of the body tissues is going to be the brain. And it actually affects your nervous system. So it has an effect on the synapses, the bits between your nerves, which has an effect on your thought processes, has an effect on your reflexes and your reactions. Now, if you continue to drink too much over a prolonged period of time, it can actually diminish your brain size. It causes inability to think abstractly, so outside the box. Loss of visuospatial abilities, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, memory loss, and a loss of attention span. So it can cause quite a few issues with the brain and the way that you actually think and process the world around you. Now, we've got here an MRI picture of somebody. On the left-hand side is a healthy person, and on the right-hand side we have got the MRI of an alcoholic, and you can see that there is some big differences in the brain structure, diminishing that size, and then that obviously having an effect on the way that you're able to process information and think about things. So can you just pop down in a sentence or two sentences the effect that alcohol has on the brain? So pause the video now and do that, please. Okay. So we're now going to look at the effects of alcohol on the liver, which is a very important organ that actually filters out poisons, and ethanol is a poison to the body, so it's very much involved in breaking that down and getting rid of it. So as I just said, alcohol is poison, and the liver is equipped to remove that alcohol before it has any permanent damage. But those that drink heavily over prolonged periods of time will obviously cause the liver not to be able to carry out that function and cause long-term damage. So you can get diseases like cirrhosis of the liver, and that's actually where the tissue, the liver tissue, is actually destroyed. And the active bit of the liver are replaced with scar tissue, and that scar tissue can't actually perform the liver's function. And the liver has many, many jobs in the body, not just removing the poisons, so that will have a knock-on effect. So here we've got an image. The top one is of a healthy liver, and the bottom one is the liver of somebody who has cirrhosis of the liver. So you can see that it is very scarred, and it means that it will not be able to perform its functions. Alcohol is also a carcinogen, so that means that people that drink too much are going to increase their risk of certain cancers, such as liver cancer. So can you pop down liver damage and in a couple of sentences summarize the information on this slide, talking about the effects of alcohol on the liver. Okay, so hopefully we've got a bit about liver damage and the effects of prolonged drinking on the liver. So we're going to move on. So I'm going to be putting up on here some different statistics, and this is mainly concerning underage drinking. So I want you to read the information, and I want you to think what you actually feel about these statistics. There's no right or wrong answer, it is your opinion, but what do you think this means for these individuals, society? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Yeah, whatever your opinion is. So we can see that there is some information in the top left about alcohol consumption of minors, and you can see that actually at the bottom bit in the pink, it says that there's over 4,300 deaths each year of minors, that's under 18. So huge number of deaths caused by binge drinking. You can see on the left at the bottom the percentage of people who drink 7 or more drinks in a single session, so that's what we class as binge drinking. And you can see that the UK is on top there, and then you've got the other countries, so you've kind of got 4 big binge drinkers: the UK, Denmark, Malta and Finland. The rest of them much lower, and some of them might be surprising to you how much they actually consume, but it's very much a UK or just a select few amount of countries who actually drink as much as we do in a single session. So you can see in the middle we've got some this results of a survey of binge drinking, what 18 to 24-year-olds say, because they are the biggest binge drinkers. Obviously 18, it's legal to buy alcohol, and you can see that a third of 18 to 24-year-olds actually class themselves as binge drinkers, so that's more than 10 drinks in one sitting for that. 41% have passed out at least once. That's quite scary considering dangers of what is around you. If you're passed out on the street on the way home or something like that, obviously that puts you in a very vulnerable position. 22% have passed out 5 or more times. 4% have passed out 20 or more times. You would really think that they would think about the amount that they are drinking at that point. 63% were more likely to have a one-night stand while drunk, and obviously that is going to tie in with what we did on communicable diseases to do with sexually transmitted infections such as gonorrhea, HIV, that we need to know for the specification. 39% of males were more likely to have a one-night stand if the other person was drunk. 10% of females were more likely to have a one-night stand if the other person was drunk. So some quite worrying statistics there from that survey. And you can see on the right-hand side, far right-hand side, we've got a picture of England, and you can see the big binge drinking areas and the lower binge drinking areas. I'm glad to see that my area, Rother, is actually relatively low compared to the other ones, especially in the north of England. So how do you feel about this information? I mean, it might be that you have partaken in some drinks in the past. Does it worry you about the number of people that are passing out on a regular basis, that are drinking huge amounts of alcohol, and all the long-term effects that entails? As I say, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just how you feel about it and what you think the consequences of these actions are. Okay, so we're going to move on, and we're going to be looking at some statistics now. So the damage to the liver and brain is associated with heavy drinking, so we've already spoken about that, and it normally takes many years for that to have an effect. But short bouts If it's very heavy drinking, so what we call binge drinking, that's kind of what's in the newspapers, quite commonly referred to. Binge drinking risks the same symptoms happening quite young. So there's actually a large amount of young people who are developing certain diseases that are associated with heavy drinkers over long periods of time, so in 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. But it's happening a lot younger. So we've got our graph. On the y-axis, we've got the number of people per 100,000. The blue line is signifying males, the red line is showing females, and then on the x-axis we have got the years. So we're going starting from just before 1992, and we're going up to 2008. And the lines are showing the increase in alcohol-related deaths in the UK. So it can be from many different things: alcohol poisoning, liver cancer, cirrhosis of the liver, accidents, anything like that, but it's associated with alcohol. So we've got 4 questions on the right hand side that I'm going to ask you to have a go at answering, and they start off just getting the information from the graph, which is an important skill to be able to do. You will be asked about it in one of your science exams, and then we've got some longer questions, some longer answer questions for C and D. So A is how many men and women died of alcohol-related diseases per 100,000 of the population in 1992. So you're going to have to read off the graph and get the numbers for men and the numbers for women. B, how many men and women died of alcohol-related diseases per 100,000 of the population in 2008? So you need to look at the other side of the graph and pick out those numbers. It will not be, it might not be exact because we obviously haven't got the lines on here, but if we get it as close as possible to my answer, that would be great. And then for C, we've got suggest. So remember, if you're ever given the command word suggest, it means that the examiner doesn't expect you to know the answer. It's just you using what you do know to give suggestions for something. So suggest reasons for this increase in alcohol-related deaths. So why have they gone up in this amount of time? And then finally, D, explain why you think alcohol remains a legal drug when it causes so many deaths. So any drug that is new to the market that causes this many deaths will be made illegal very, very quickly. So why is it that alcohol remains legal? Okay, so pause the video and have a go at those questions. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some of the answers to that. So the first one was asking how many men and women had alcohol-related deaths in 1992, and men it was 9 for every 100,000, and for women it was 5. In 2008, so for B, for men a number around 18 to 19 per 100,000, and for women it was between 8 and 9 per 100,000. So the next question was suggesting why those numbers have gone up. So I've given some suggestions here. If you've got 3 of these, brilliant. So it's more socially acceptable to drink large amounts than what it used to be. The cost of alcohol is lower. Wages have gone up. You might have said that there's more deals in supermarkets and things like that for alcohol. That is now banned in Scotland. You can't do reduced price alcohol because of that. You could say that younger people are drinking more, or people are drinking younger than what they used to. People are drinking more, or you might have mentioned binge drinking, and that there's more people addicted to alcohol. So if you've got 3 of those suggestions, then fantastic. And the last one, D, was explaining why it's not illegal, considering how many deaths it causes. So you might have talked about its popularity, so it'd be very hard to ban in America. Obviously, I can't remember what year it was, but they banned alcohol. That didn't go very well because it's very popular. It's part of the culture. So pubs and things like that are a very important part of British culture. It generates revenue for the government, so it's very highly taxed, the same as tobacco. So it means that the government gets a lot of money from it, and then that money goes towards the NHS, police, things like that. Most people actually enjoy it sensibly, so most people don't abuse alcohol. So would it be fair to make it illegal if it's this minority that are abusing it? It's hard to change legal status after so many years, so that's why they try and make new drugs illegal very quickly, because if it's many years down the line, it makes it a lot harder to actually make illegal. Many people in authority use alcohol themselves, so people in government, things like that, will be partaking in alcohol, so they're not going to want to ban it. And as I said earlier, the banning of alcohol in America, which was called Prohibition, failed quite badly, and actually it caused a lot of criminality. So a lot of people were selling it illegally, and some say that kind of pushed for mafia and things like that, which then were an issue for many years afterwards. So very well done. That last one was quite a tricky one because obviously it's definitely thinking more outside the box and looking at society as opposed to just the science of it. So very well done if you got some of those suggestions. So now we're going to be moving on to alcohol and pregnancy. So we spoke about in the smoking lesson about the effects of smoking on an unborn baby or the fetus. Now we're going to have a look at alcohol. So the chief medical officers for the UK recommend that if you're pregnant or planning on becoming pregnant, the safest approach is not to drink alcohol at all. Now, it used to be the advice that you could have up to 1 drink per day if you were pregnant a while back. But now it's pretty much advised that you don't drink any alcohol whatsoever during pregnancy. And that's just because that reduces the risk significantly to your unborn baby. Drinking in pregnancy can lead to long-term harm to the baby. With the more you drink, the greater the risk. And pretty much all of the long-term effects are untreatable. So there isn't a cure for the child after it's born, or indeed if it is born. When you drink, alcohol goes into the blood, the mother's blood, and it will pass through the placenta into the baby's blood. So it will have the same effects as it's having on the mother, but it's actually happening on this baby, this fetus, that hasn't developed its organs fully. So it's much more susceptible. In fact, the liver, as it says, the liver is one of the last organs to develop, so that means that it's not even able to get rid of, process that poison. The baby cannot process the alcohol such as an adult can, and if it's got this prolonged exposure, it can seriously affect their development. So we're going to have a look at some of the effects of drinking heavily during pregnancy. Before we move on though, can we put down about the recommended amount of alcohol to have when you are pregnant, which is 0. And that's all we need to take from this slide. So we're going to have a look at some of the effects of drinking alcohol during pregnancy. Now, continuing to drink alcohol for the first 3 months of pregnancy increases the risk of miscarriage, premature birth, and the baby having a low birth weight. So those are similar effects that we discussed for smoking. Now, if a mother continues drinking after the first 3 months, it can have a couple of quite serious effects on the baby that will stay with the baby for the rest of their life. So some of these include learning difficulties and behavioural problems, and a serious condition called fetal alcohol syndrome, which we're actually going to look at a little bit more in the next slide. So can you put down some of the problems associated with drinking during pregnancy from this slide? Okay, so we've got a picture on the right hand side, a couple of pictures on the right hand side. The top one is showing a child who does have FAS, or fetal alcohol syndrome, and underneath it we've got an image of the brains. On the left hand side is a normal child brain, on the right hand side is a child who has fetal alcohol syndrome. So you can see that there is a big difference between those two brains, with the fetal alcohol syndrome brain being significantly smaller. Now, we need to know some of the effects of fetal alcohol syndrome. So we're going to go through some of those effects. You can jot them down as we go, but if you put as a little mini title, fetal alcohol syndrome is one of the effects of drinking during pregnancy. Now, fetal alcohol syndrome tends to happen if a mother is heavily drinking throughout her whole pregnancy. And the effects of fetal alcohol syndrome on a child will be the following. So poor growth in the womb and after birth, so it will often tend to be a lot smaller. It can cause muscle weakness and poor coordination. Problems in 3 or more major areas, including thinking, speech, movement, or social skills. Fetal alcohol syndrome can cause heart defects and also facial abnormalities. The risk of birth abnormality is about 1 in 1,000 if the mother is not drinking, whereas if the mother is drinking during pregnancy, then birth abnormality is as high as 1 in 20. And there is no treatment, no cure for children that are born with fetal alcohol syndrome. So can you pop down some of the effects of fetal alcohol syndrome in your notes, please? Okay, if you need more time, pause the video. We're going to be moving on to the last bit of the lesson. We're moving away from alcohol and now looking at some of the other causes of cancer, which is ionizing radiation. So when you come to do physics next... Oh no, sorry, you have done this topic. I forgot they swapped it round, the paper's round. So you will have done in physics about the electromagnetic spectrum, and so you should be familiar with ionizing radiation. And ionizing radiation in the form of different types, so it's different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and ionizing radiation is a well-known carcinogen. Now, what happens is that radiation will actually go into your cells and it will damage the DNA. Now, not quite often, but because you'll have an effect on many cells, sometimes that DNA damage can cause mutations. And mutations is a really important term to use in your exam. If you're asked about the effects of ionizing radiation on the body, we need to say mutations to the DNA. Now, those mutations can then go on and develop into cancer. So ionizing radiation causes mutations in DNA, which can lead to cancer. Now, where can we get this radiation? It is all around us naturally. It's not like some people think that we're just getting this ionizing radiation from nuclear power plants, things like that. It is naturally all around us. It's called background radiation. But there are some other areas which is caused by humans. So ultraviolet light from the sun, we know that this increases the risk of increases the risk of skin cancers such as melanoma, which we looked at in a previous lesson. We've got that natural background radiation, so we have low doses of this ionizing radiation all around us. Medical and dental x-rays, so that will actually create more ionizing radiation, and also nuclear accidents such as Chernobyl. Now, during lockdown, one of the series that I did binge on was the Chernobyl series that was on Sky. I paid for it on Amazon. I don't know if you've seen it before. I can't remember what the age rating is, but it is really, really interesting. It's really, really good watch, and it's just looking at the Chernobyl disaster, and also it has got some good links to society, because obviously it was under the Soviet umbrella, which meant that a lot of information wasn't given out, so a lot of people were affected and still affected today because of that secrecy. Definitely recommend it. Really good watch. So can we put down, this is the last slide now, can we put down ionizing radiation? Can we make sure that we have got about the effects of ionizing radiation on the body? So mutations to DNA, which can develop into cancer. And then can we make sure that we have got the sources of radiation as well? So pause the video now and pop that down, please. Okay, so that is it from me today. And as I said at the start, this is the last lesson on health and disease. So hopefully all of us can state some of the effects of alcohol. Hopefully for 5 to 6, I think most of us would be able to describe some of the short and long-term effects of drinking alcohol. So short-term effects is that feeling good, vomiting, dizziness, reduced reaction times. Long-term effects, cirrhosis of the liver, liver cancer, and things like that. Hopefully we're also able to describe the effects of alcohol on unborn babies, so some of the effects of drinking through pregnancy, so the ones that are similar to smoking, which is the premature births, low birth weight, or even miscarriages, and then the effects if you're drinking throughout, including fetal alcohol syndrome. Describe the link between ionizing radiation and cancer. So I hope we need to know that sentence that I kept saying on the last slide, the ionizing radiation mutates the DNA, and that can lead to cancer. 7 to 8, explain in detail how drinking alcohol affects the nervous system. So this is talking about coordination, reflexes, and the brain. Evaluate the evidence on the effects of alcohol on a developing baby. So what evidence is there that it has an effect? Is that good evidence or bad evidence? And then explaining the link between radiation and cancer. So again, it's ionizing radiation mutates the DNA, which can lead to cancer. So that is it from me today. Thank you very much, and well done for partaking in this lesson. We're going to be moving on to photosynthesis tomorrow, which is one of 2 chapters, along with respiration, which is looking at energy in organisms. So well done. Take care of yourselves. Have a lovely day, and you'll hear from me tomorrow.